to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome back to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're going to demystify a tool that's as critical for marketers as Google Analytics itself. Let's get straight into today's episode. My guest thrives best at the sweet spot between data, business, and technology. It may not have seemed that way all along. He graduated with a philosophy degree from the University of Utrect and started his career as a journalist for several Dutch publications, writing about everything from events and pop culture to media, politics, and economics. Around 2014, he switched from letters to numbers, working in conversion rate optimization for several European e-commerce businesses. That led him to building dashboards and leveraging cloud platforms to turn raw data into usable marketing insights. Working at an analytics firm that exposed him to BigQuery, he thought about sharing all the things that he was learning. He checked on the domain GA4BigQuery.com and it was available. So he registered it and started posting there as a side gig. It got noticed by Simo Ahava, the founder of Simmer. That led him to release the GA4 and BigQuery course on the Simmer training platform. As we fast forward to 2023, GA4 BigQuery is now a very well-known resource for marketers. And its creator is now consulting full-time on data analytics under his own brand, SelectStar. Oh, except for when he's having fun playing in a punk rock cover band. Let's go talk with my guest, Johan van de Werken. I'm so glad to welcome Johan van de Werken. How are you doing, Johan?
I'm great. Thank you, Glenn.
Really glad to have you on. Today we're going to delve into how our website data is actually part of a much larger group of data, which we can use to make our marketing substantially better. Can you start by telling us first how we've kind of moved on from simply thinking of our Google Analytics as a user interface where we're going into a screen, looking at a chart, and then leaving for another menu item that has another chart. You know, all this read-only data that is just somewhere, and we will close it up and leave it for a month and then come back maybe just to do our next monthly report. What's happened?
Yeah, sure. It's easy to tell you because that's exactly the journey I've been having myself, right? I started out as a web analyst, looking at Google Analytics reports, Universal Analytics, mostly the standard reports, right? When I felt really exotic, I used the Google Sheets to move some Google Analytics data via an add-on to Google Sheets to be able to wrangle the data, right? But that was about it. So in my personal journey, there was a moment that I had a problem that I could do a lot of fancy stuff with that Google Analytics data collected in the user interface, imported in Google Sheets, but then my sheets usually would freeze because Google Sheets at that time couldn't contain as much information as Microsoft Excel could.
Right, but even Excel has an upper limit.
Yeah, but Excel is like, Excel would be like maybe 1 million rows already, right?
Right.
Google Sheets was about a few 100,000, and that was it. And then depending on the amount of columns, you will easily
total cells gets too high and it just grinds to a halt.
And usually what I would do is build dashboards on top of that. So I would start Data Studio, now known as Looker Studio. I would connect it to a Google Sheet that was automatically powered by Google Analytics, like triggered. Data was scheduled, like daily. But then, quite soon I reached the limits of that approach. And I was doing that for clients, like at a consultancy agency and digital marketing agency. And those clients paid me money to do that, right? So when you have multiple clients, like tens, dozens of dashboards all running on Google Sheets, and those are not reliable, they broke in the weekends, I had to find another solution. And that was when I discovered the world of data warehouses. And in my case, that was because I was in a Google ecosystem, that was Google BigQuery. I had some clients that were Google Analytics 360 clients, so they were enterprise, and that had a native integration from Google Analytics to Google BigQuery. And that was the moment I started to panic mildly, because I discovered I had to learn something, and that was SQL, because you can only query that data if you use the programming language SQL. Or I shouldn't say programming language, it's more like a database query language.
Right, that's the Q in SQL.
Yeah, so for the purist amongst us. So I thought I was quite an expert on Google Analytics, Web Analytics field, but then it turned out I was a total rookie in another field. And that was when I started to invest a lot of time, private time, a bit of work time, but also evenings, weekends, just to learn that stuff, to read.
If I can just ask you at that point, just on that journey, you felt humbled and maybe a little scared because you realized that you were ignorant of how to do something. But tell me, because you were looking at this information, which only people who paid a lot of money to Google Analytics could get that view of the information, did part of it excite you? Because what you had with, let's say, the free version of Universal was the data as it came, right? In the format that someone who had structured a tab on a menu and a certain report, this is the way it's going to look. This is what you get. Maybe you can add a secondary dimension, but that's it.
Yeah.
Now you move into a realm that is, I want to see anything by anything, or, it's at least more flexible. So did that offset your fear?
Well, for instance, there were a lot of limitation in that user interface, right? So we usually would also collect a timestamp on hit level or something. So for every interaction, a timestamp with the seconds, not only the hour and the minute, which are available in the user interface, but not the second level, right? Or the microsecond. Sometimes you want to do really advanced analysis on something, on what is the average amount of time between two interactions. That was just not possible in that user interface. So for those kind of use cases, it was like the ultimate solution, because now when you took that hurdle to learn SQL, you could access really detailed data, hit level. It was called back then, before GA4, because now everything is event level, but then it was called hit level. And a hit could be an interaction, a page view, or an event. And certainly I was able to do the most fancy stuff with that. And that gave me a big reward in the form of the feeling of freedom, right?
Right.
I already had that a bit in the Google Sheets, where I was searching for words here, like squeezing insights out of the data, right? You could apply your own formulas. That was all very hard to do in the user interface. You could do custom reports, but still you were very limited. And in Google Sheets, you could change a month into year month. I don't know.
Sure.
Extract the weekday out of a date or something. Stuff like that. Or convert euros into dollars. I don't know.
Right.
Stuff like that. Custom stuff. That would be really interesting for that specific business case for that client, right? And that was when I had that feeling with Google Sheets. This was so in BigQuery with that raw hit level Google Analytics data, I had that feelings, but then like X 100, right?
Yes. Yes. And that freedom I think you're talking about also is that you have the freedom to translate this type of data into something that matters to a business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And every business is going to have its own flavor of what they care about. But now you, instead of saying to them, I'm sorry, I can't satisfy that order, you can say to them, yes, I can do that.
Indeed. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm going too quick here, but then I learned that that specific client also had other data available, right? They could have data about SEO or SEA, Google Ads, Search Console. They could have email, a CRM tool or an email tool. They could have their whole backend systems
Right.
available in a table somewhere. And that table could be imported manually or automatically in BigQuery. And suddenly you have a whole bunch of first-party data, right? So you have, when you're using Google Analytics data, you're always used to not have the entire truth because there will be people that block trackers. There will be technical limitations.
Yep. Or if you're in, let's say, a business-to-business scenario, you don't have the whole story because the website isn't what gets you all the way to a sale. The rest of the
Indeed.
story is held in other systems, which tell what happened later.
Indeed. But for the part that happens on site, it's also not the truth, right? So
yes,
that thought gradually came into my mind after being a web analyst for years and always reporting on transactions, sales, everything to customers.
Yes.
And always wondering why it was so hard to make them look at my dashboards. And eventually I understood because they didn't trust my data. And they were right.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. It is. Especially for a whole industry of marketing and analytics professionals.
Yes.
That want to help a client but are simply not able to do it because they don't have the data and they don't have access to the data most of the times.
This would be, if we stretch my order taker notion a little farther, this would be like you understood and accepted that no matter how good the portion that you were providing them, let's say it's a portion of a meal, they didn't consider it the full meal. And that was because there were other systems that had this information locked up in them that only once you sussed the data out of those and combined it with the data you had on web analytics, could you then give them a comprehensive meal, right?
Yeah. And not only combine it, but
yes,
switch it around.
Right,
so
manipulate.
Web analytics is not the base where you start. It's the own data of that client, the transactional or client data. That is the start. And the other data sources you connect. If you can connect it or join it, they are attached to it, but it's not the starting point anymore. So it's a total shift.
Yes.
In your head as a web analyst, right?
Yes. And at the risk of stating the obvious, what you said about your own usage of a web analytics interface and coming to the realization that it was actually just looking at a data set and that you could get to that raw data set yourself. I fear, for most of us in marketing, a decade of indoctrination by very sophisticated and frankly aesthetically pleasing to look at web packages, these marketing automation tools, these CRM tools. We have been brought up into this thinking of how these SaaS products will do everything that we need and we needn't look any further. But they are also built of the same stuff as a Google Analytics is. They're a front-end interface to a back-end database. And we can now get to that back-end database for everything.
Indeed. Yeah.
It's a wonderful place to be, right? We're living at a cool time.
Definitely. And while I figured out all this, then, and I think I am a bit on the way of being one of the guys in that scene, right? That can operate at a certain level.
Yep. Then
there's a whole new host of AI stuff like entering this whole world. And so it's always, I've learned to get used to the feeling that you're always lagging behind, right? Yeah. When it comes to knowledge, but at least, I'm trying.
And you're trying to do it in a pretty open way. So you documented what you were learning.
Indeed.
Frankly, you documented the individual, I could maybe sometimes call them recipes or procedure lists. And you started to think, well, I'm not the only one who is probably learning this at this time. Why don't I share it with others? So tell us what that led to.
That was, it started like 2019 already, I think, with the Universal Analytics Export, right? So it was quite a select audience back then.
Yes.
But while I was learning all that stuff and how to calculate metrics, because it's all raw data, right? A lot of metrics are not available right out of the box, so you have to calculate stuff. I decided to write down what I learned on an article on Medium and share it with the community. And that was like a mega hit. That article was so popular, and I understood why, because I wrote that article out of frustration about the lack of documentation from Google, right, about this topic. And well, soon I figured out I was not the only one. So it was quite popular. And then I decided to start my own blog. So I blogged for a while. But then App and Web was announced, which is now known as GA4, Google Analytics 4. It was called App and Web. So I was like, will there be a raw data export to BigQuery in that new version of Google Analytics? And quite quickly I found out that it was not only in there, but it was also available for free for everyone that has a Google Cloud account. So then I thought, it struck in my mind that this could be a huge opportunity to be one of the front runners of documenting stuff for that, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote another, as soon as I got my hand on a test version or a beta version of App and Web, I activated it and I wrote another Medium article about it. And a few months later, I thought, well, let's claim my own domain, GA4BigQuery.com, and start writing on that, just to have it, to have control over my own content, right?
Right. And if we haven't said it thus far, BigQuery is merely the data warehousing component within Google Cloud. So we are, they can sometimes be used interchangeably, but we merely mean there's a place that you can go to keep data, frankly, for as long historically as you want to and are willing to pay, should it get large enough that you need to pay for it. And you can hold this data that is coming also into your GA4 account. But this is the raw data that is yours to do with as you please.
Yeah. It will not, as long as you pay for it, it will not get deleted like in the user interface. At a certain time, depending on your data retention settings, the data will not be there anymore, right? So,
right.
Only for storage, or for building a historical collection of your web analytics data, it's already interesting to activate it.
I'm breaking away for a moment, and I have to say that I couldn't do this show without your incredible support. You can keep up to date via social media. Take your pick of Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all of them. If you want to be notified of new episodes, visit funnelreboot.com. It'll give you a form for being emailed when each new show is out. Our website also has links to many of the podcast apps we're found on. And once you pull up the show on your app, I'd love you to subscribe to it. Lastly, if you know someone else who'd get value out of this content, please share the show's URL with them so they can do the same. I hope that along with listening, you'll consider joining the email list, following us on social, or subscribing and sharing. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, Johan, we know that you've got this resource and that you decided to go on this quest of recording what you learn and sharing it and helping other people. Can you tell me, how technical does someone need to be able to use the information that you're putting into your resource?
Well,
what do they need to know?
There are multiple things. So now we're talking about GA4, right?
Yeah.
So we're having a situation when digital marketings already have struggled to move to another version of Google Analytics. So I would say before you start using that raw event data that is available at your request via the native connector to BigQuery, you should really understand how Google Analytics 4 is different from Universal Analytics.
So we're talking here about a data model.
That's about a data model. So, and the main difference for those who don't get it or still didn't look into it is in Universal Analytics, everything was centered around the concept of a session, one website visit, and that visit ended if you weren't active for 30 minutes by default. In Google Analytics 4, it's totally different. There is, at least in the beginning of GA4, there were no sessions. There were only users and events. And an event is basically an interaction. That can be a page view, can be a click on a button, a success of a form, you name it. But there was no session. Eventually, after a lot of protests, Google came back from that a bit, I guess, and they reintroduced the session reporting in the user interface, but you will not find it in the raw data. So you have to construct the idea of a session, you have to construct it yourself, and then you're faced with a choice. Am I just going to use the default proposal of Google, which was the same as in the previous version? It's someone lands on your website, does or does not have interactions with it, And after 30 minutes, we call it a day, right? And if someone tries to interact again, even without reloading the page, we just call it a new session. Or am I actually starting to use the brains that I got when I was born and think for myself, what is a session? What am I interested in?
Yeah.
Because you can calculate everything you want.
Right.
So you have to also think about what you want. And I think that is also new to a lot of people.
Well, you've half answered my question, actually. Maybe technical isn't the word for it because that implies learning a language, but you have explained that what someone needs is an open mind. Indeed. And they need to be ready to encounter information in GA4 which they will have to interpret.
Indeed.
Into what's meaningful for their business. Where let's imagine that the data that came in Universal through the interface was quite it was maybe prepared for you. So now, back to this notion of freedom. We have the freedom to say, well, in my world, let's say I make a little mobile website experience that's interactive. I don't think I'm worried about a session because someone may pick up their phone, interact with what I've built, put it down, but then come back to it later and interact with it again. And Google Analytics 4 can handle that no problem. I have to decide, what does that mean? How is that an impact on my business? Are they engaging with me? And what can I do with that? What is important about that, right? So we really have to get our ingenuity and innovative juices flowing for this.
Indeed, that's not only a hurdle, I would say, but also a very exciting opportunity, right, for a lot of people from the digital marketing world to step into a new world. And that world is not new, actually, because data analytics and querying databases is like as old as the
we were doing it in the 20th century, right?
Indeed, and that's a long time ago.
Like databases and SQL for all that time. It's just new to us.
Indeed, yeah.
And that's the other part is that we can start to get the lingo of things like databases. And I know this is an important part of what you've built inside of your portal is a breakdown of the dimensions and the metrics that Google Analytics 4 uses. Can you explain to us why we care whether something is a dimension or a metric?
Yeah, so basically dimension would be in a normal table, you would have your dimensions on the left. Those will probably be your rows, and the metrics will be a count of something or a sum of something.
The columns,
something you can aggregate.
Right.
And the dimensions is something you can use to group by or to order by, for instance. Although that can also be done with metrics. So metrics are most of the times numbers that you can perform calculations on, right?
Yes. This is back to the show me anything by anything, right? So in that construct, we have show me metrics by this dimension.
Indeed. And the dimensions can be segments.
You can show me visitors segments by continent.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Dimensions can breed other dimensions, right? A continent has countries, or subregions. Subregions have countries. Countries have regions and provinces, and it goes on and on.
Indeed, and that can enable you to do down drilling, right? So you can have a metric, it's the amount of visitors per country, and then if you drill down to a layer beneath that is probably cities or something, or regions. And then the metric will be calculated again against this new dimension. That's the beauty of it, because that concept, you can use that in a dashboard.
That's right.
Especially in tools where the end user can interact with the dashboard to do the down drilling. And to see the recalculation happening. And that's like, if you think about it, it's magic, right?
It's wonderful when you're getting them to self-serve and you're doing stuff in a way that is meaningful. So we're not discouraging, let's say that we're a person in marketing who's known as the technical one, like the operations-minded one. We're not saying that you should hoard this ability and not let people use analytics. But if they don't want to go ahead and learn GA4 and go on the same journey you have, you can make them a simple little dashboard in Looker Studio, but it can have that kind of interaction that it has a semblance of what they could do in GA4, but maybe that's enough for them. And
indeed,
that is a wonderful thing that you've let them help themselves. They're now not bothering you all the time, but they're also not getting frustrated by an interface that has many parts to it that they'll never need to know.
Indeed, yeah. Totally true. And that touches upon something else, that with that freedom comes great responsibility, right? That responsibility is,
yes.
I don't mean it in an ethical way this time, although you can fill a whole new podcast about the ethical side of GA4, but I mean it in a data quality way, right? When you have the freedom to construct concepts yourself and using SQL, which is also something you have to learn, obviously, but it's relatively easy to learn. You can, as long as your query is valid in the query editor, right? Let's say you use BigQuery or an IDE for that. It will give you the green check mark and you will get a result. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what you did is meaningful, right? So you have a technical, validity of your syntax, the language you're writing, the query, the question that you're asking, is that making sense on a technical level? So the database understands what you are asking, but
sure,
it's a different thing if that answer you will get it's basically giving you a number, but if you don't really understand the concept of what you are doing, what you are asking, then you could look at something that is totally not making sense, right? And if you don't grasp the concept, and that's why I emphasized that at the beginning, what do you need to learn? You have to dream the data model, right? You have to really understand it on a deeper level. Otherwise, you will be more happier with a self-service solution, I would say.
Right. But I think this is why I plead, and I think you would join me in pleading with marketers who could easily say, I don't want to understand this stuff, that they should persist, because maybe to borrow your Spider-Man quote there, with great power comes great responsibility. The power that they have compared to one of these other people, nothing against them, but people who have an IT background and who've been immersed in SQL for a long time. Why the marketer has more power than they ever will is because the marketer understands the semantic meaning of what each of these dimensions are. They understand how this correlates to an action that a visitor took on a page.
Indeed.
And they are sitting there in front of this beautiful data set. As you said, they can ask any question of it and it will give an answer. But the jump, the delta between an answer and the right answer, or a an answer which will help drive the success of our business, there's no comparison.
Indeed, yeah. So that's also why I like to position myself as I thrive between data, tech, and business, right? I'm not only in data, but I'm also not in business. I'm also not in tech, right? It's happening in that sweet spot between. And that's really where the added value of a good technical marketer
Where they should
be, where they should be. Yeah, indeed.
Johan, there are some other pieces to Google Cloud, not just BigQuery, but it is a robust and very kind of enterprise styled platform. It has many, many pieces to it. Some of those pieces need to be given permission to talk to other pieces. It has rules about how you can use data, how long data is held on to. This is a lot more structured than someone who's sitting down in front of a Google Sheet. Do you think that someone has a hope of trying to get BigQuery set up to, let's say, receive information from all these different data sources, set up the right imports, set up the right permissions? Do you think they have a hope of doing this on their own, or would you strongly recommend that they look to a tutorial like the ones you've done so that they can just follow it and get to where they want to go?
Yeah. There are multiple things to this. Usually, it all starts with making the data available, right, in a data warehouse. So when it comes to GA4, the process is relatively easy. There's good documentation also from Google on it, how to activate that connector, what settings you have to set to not lose data, to not make your data public for the whole world to see. That's quite easy. Then connecting it to a tool like Looker Studio to visualize the data is also not really hard, but you have to understand that if you connect another tool like Looker Studio to it, and that's directly querying your raw event data, there can be cost involved. Because in BigQuery, you don't only pay for storage, but also for the querying of the data. So if you connect a Looker Studio dashboard to your BigQuery Google Analytics 4 tables, and you manage to set up a query that actually works and it powers your dashboard, and you add 10 colleagues of your company to that dashboard, and they start interacting with all those fancy filters you built for them, every click will in the backend of Google Analytics, Google Cloud, every click from Google Cloud will generate a query. And it will start querying that raw data. And if you have a date period set up for, let's say, the last year to date or the last 2 years, then it will have to process all those raw event tables for all those days, which can be hundreds of days. And then you will run into a very costly situation. So you need to have some information, some knowledge about how to set it up so you won't end up in a situation like this. And basically, it's quite simple. You have the raw data, you query it, you make it run each night automatically, and it will create like a table in between, right?
Right.
And that table is relatively very small, and you can connect your dashboard to that table. And in that way, you will never run into very high costs. Things like this are really important to know.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that most marketers wouldn't have thought of them. They are things that people who have been used to handling large amounts of data have. These are conventions they have developed. And you gather them together. I would say that we could call them tips and tricks. So you have a section that is devoted to just those types of things, and then back to the kind of one-time setups. You have tutorials, which I would recommend to people who, if you're only going to need to do this once, and you don't find good documentation elsewhere, it would be wise of you to follow what Johan has laid out, because it will work. It'll work as intended when you follow it exactly the way he says.
I can only agree. Yeah. And there are other solutions, right? So the other thing, if I may add to that, is sometimes you really need the help of, let's say, a data engineer or an IT specialist from your company to make sure your backend data is flowing into that warehouse as well. But there are also third-party SaaS solutions for that can handle that. So, of course, it will cost you some money, but they will do all the heavy lifting and make sure that you will see the data from marketing tools, from CRM tools, end up in your data warehouse. And that way, it is possible for a one-man band,
Yes,
one-man marketing band to set up a data warehouse.
Yeah, and those providers, I guess we'll lump them together into the category of ETL.
Yeah,
they're very helpful. The hookup between ETL and Google Cloud still involves a little bit of things that you will only need to do once, and that it is wise to have a series of steps to follow.
Yeah.
Johan, a quick mention of how you have set up this resource, because there are people who may be eager to try things on their own, and you make that information kind of freely available for them. You just have, basically they're like word files, right, of steps that you follow. But then you offer something that is at a paid tier, but that helps people who may not want to maybe have to follow something as procedural as that, maybe, or they want a little bit more of a guided tour. So can you tell me how you do that?
Are you referring to the premium stuff that I offer on my website? Yeah. So that is because I saw that there is a lot of demand, obviously, with all those migrations to GA4. And looking at all the time I invested in that content, I figured out that I could ask something from my audience. And so I have a subscription model on my platform. And for those that subscribe, the premium subscription, they will get really thorough tutorials on, I would say, more advanced subjects. Maybe the business case is not really advanced, but the way that I describe it is done in a way that you can really, if you master like basic SQL, you can just follow the steps there and you are set to go. Maybe you have to customize a bit for your own situation, but for instance, I explain how to calculate your own definition of a session based on time, or based on the session only ends when a certain conversion happened, across what Google would consider multiple sessions. Those kind of things. But also, how can I make sure that I can activate that native export to BigQuery and then send it to my own data warehouse, maybe in AWS or in Azure. What do I need to do to be able to send the data in a certain format to that other cloud?
That's right. Google Cloud is not the only cloud out there. And Johan, when we're trying to, let's say, customize things more for ourselves, I think you're making the argument that we will want to do this because this granularity that it affords us is where we're going to truly find those things, those insights, or maybe even build those miniature data feeds that go elsewhere or that feed our marketing campaigns, that we can truly leverage this platform and get full value out of it. Is that your belief?
That's indeed where the added value is in my opinion. Indeed.
And you mentioned, and it's a person who's previously been on this show, Mark Edmondson. I saw an article in there where you described the book that he wrote, which is called Learning Google Analytics, as a great resource. By the way, props to you for acknowledging other people in this community. I know that you're lending what you have, but you also never shy away from thanking and encouraging people to reach out to others who understand.
Of course,
this.
Yeah.
Why do you think Mark's book is such a key contribution to the body of knowledge that we have on this?
Yeah, I think I described it as the Bible of GA4, right? And
right.
That is because he's able to not only offer us, indeed, there you have it, I can see it, is not only able to say, hey, this is the tool, and if you click here, then you will get that report, etc. But right. he will broaden the scope. Like, what are the actual use cases in marketing, in tech, that you can use GA4, and how can you do that? And then using different tools, I can learn a lot about Google Cloud, other stuff you can do in Google Cloud, for instance.
All the AI, machine learning, all
Indeed.
of it.
I know nothing about that. That is still a world to gain for me. It's a bit confronting, but that's why I really think that we can learn a lot from each other. And definitely, I always try to, give back to the community a bit, because that's what I learned it from, right? From others in the community.
Very well put. And the journey continues, I guess. This is an important thing to note. And this is why I'm sure that if you and I are talking in a year's time, what is going to be available in GA4 BigQuery will be much larger and will probably be brimming with all sorts of use cases that people are finding, are telling you about, things that you are trying and learning about. And I understand that you are also now offering your services to people who want, beyond, let's say, just seeing the tutorial that you have, but they would be interested in having your own help with it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. I just basically quit my job, and I had a good job, and I had wonderful colleagues. But eventually, with all those side hustles that I already had going, I wanted more from that. So I wanted to be able to serve multiple clients, to dive into multiple use cases, right? Also learn from that and write about that on my platform, and vice versa. So that's really why I decided to start as an independent data analyst, as I call it. I don't position myself as a web analyst only, because I've learned things that are much broader than that, but I will certainly always keep doing web analyst things as well, but more in a broad context. But also, and also working outside of the Google and ecosystem, for instance.
Right.
But what I will do is use data warehousing as a core of what I do.
The world of data science, data engineering is converging with marketing.
Yeah.
This is like watching the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way come together. It's happening. And we have people like you to look at who are honest about what you still don't know, what you're finding out, and sharing it. And the fact that you're doing it in, several different ways, including some that are completely free, is a great thing. And I want to thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate you coming on the show. Last thing, Johan, would there be a specific place? We've mentioned the resource itself, and I'll have it in the show notes. But if people want to reach out to you specifically, how can they do that?
There are two ways. So first is LinkedIn. You can find me, Johan van de Werken, if you can spell that. And the second is my own company website. It's called selectstar.nl.
Wonderful. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.